It's time for Around the Ozarks Sports Scene, sponsored by Fast Break Sports and The Pitch. Here's your host, Scott Puryear.
Welcome into another edition of Around the Ozarks Sports Scene. I am Scott Puryear. As always, big thanks to you for taking time this week to listen to the podcast. We love to talk sports and newsmakers and the people that are on the news in cases too. And that's the case today because we're going to visit with Sully Engels, the KY3 sports director. Sully, thanks for joining me today.
Happy to be here. You know, I've heard nothing but good things whenever I've listened, so I'm happy to be a part of it right now.
Well, I appreciate that, and you've sucked up enough there that we'll get into some good stuff right off the bat with you there. Been in Springfield since August, replaced Mark Spillane over there as sports director. Spillane went back up to the East Coast to his New Jersey home. Recently just got back, yesterday from the Super Bowl in New Orleans, and so we're going to talk a lot about that, but kind of first wanted to talk about who is Sully Engels and how did he wind up in Springfield, Missouri?
Yeah, that is a good question right there. So if you want to go all the way back, kind of the start for me, I'm born and raised in California, in Los Angeles. Went to school in Northern California for college, Chico State. I played baseball there. So, my whole life always wanted to be around sports. Obviously, for a long time, I was like, I want to be a major leaguer. But, when I could only throw 87 miles an hour, I was like, I don't think this is going to work out for me. So I got to figure out another way to stay around the diamond, to stay around a field, whatever it may be. I just knew that's what I wanted to do. I was lucky. The school I went to was a Division II school. And so my last year there, after I'd finished playing, I had one more year to kind of finish up my degree. And that's when I really got into the media aspect of things. I was a journalism major. I wanted to be a writer. But they gave me a camera my last year, and I just sort of fell in love with that. So once I graduated, went back home to L.A. I worked at the ABC station there behind the scenes. Then my winding journey, I went to Wyoming for a couple months for a job that didn't work out. Then I went to Topeka, Kansas. I was there for about 2.5 years. Then I went down to Wichita, Kansas. I was there for 3 years. And in Wichita, it was great. I had a great time there. I love the people of Wichita, but just sort of didn't work out at the station. So then I was sort of a free agent essentially, and KY3 reached out to me, kind of the fate, the timing of it all. And once I learned a little bit more about the sports scene here, the history of KY3 and the appreciation for sports in the area, it just felt like the right place for me to be. So came over here now, and it's been a nice transition. I get a bit of things I've been covering for the last 60 years in the Royals and all Kansas City sports, Chiefs as well, obviously. But then I get to mix in St. Louis now and the Cardinals and the great baseball history there, the Blues, and then, of course, everything around the Ozarks, everything we do for the Ozone Show, Missouri State, and all the other colleges around here. So it's been awesome to be here so far. My wife and I love it here. We live down in Ozark, and really this entire area we've just fallen more and more in love with. And truthfully, I can't wait for summer because that's, my favorite time of year, and it doesn't seem like there's many better places to be in the area or in the country than right here in the Ozarks for that time of year.
Got to ask you, what kind of name is Sully? Is that short for something?
Yeah, it's funny. It's actually my middle name. It's Sullivan. My dad is Robert. My grandpa is Robert. I'm not a junior or a third, though. My dad goes by Bob. So I've been Sully my whole life. It's not like a screen name or anything like that.
Uh-huh.
If you talk to my friends, family, they called me Sully the whole time. And growing up, that was I got from Younger People Monsters, Inc., the scarer there. And then, of course, the famous pilot, Sullenberger. A lot of people like to call that. Some people kind of play off that. But, to me, I like it. It's a unique name, and I've always gone by that.
So I spent some time at KY3 and, of course, been a longtime viewer and did radio with the old guy for years and years. First question, does KY3 still sing like an anthem to Chris Parker or the Ozone every morning before you go to work? Because the guy just lives there and probably works. Actually, I think they're letting him work from home some now, right? Because he works about 18 hours a day.
Yeah, there is no harder worker in the area than Chris Parker, and I am so lucky to have him with my team. If you don't know Chris, he's the behind-the-scenes, the digital guy. If you go to the Ozone website, he's got his hands in everything there, and his knowledge of the area is as if he has an encyclopedia of the Ozarks high school sports scene in front of him at all times. I can ask him every Friday when we go through the football show in the fall if I ever need any little stat, any tidbit, or even just a nickname of a high school I haven't seen yet. Probably within 5 seconds, he's got it for me. So we love Chris Parker, and we love working with him, too. He's one of the best in the area and someone I'm happy to call a friend as well.
Parker knows the backup catcher at Koshkonong. if you ask him. So that and who her little sister is, it's coming up in 7th grade. So that's a good thing. But I got it. You get here in August. It's time. It's go time with sports. I mean, if you'd got here June or so, you'd had a little time to thank Spillane, for leaving right before the start of the season. But you get over to KY3, great people there. Love Brian McDonough. Then you do your first Monday, and some old guy wanders in. Did you think a homeless guy had kind of come into the studio, or when did they tell you about Ned Reynolds, and that's the legend of Ned Reynolds?
Yeah, it's hard to hear about KY3 and not hear about Ned instantly. I feel like I've heard so much more about him before I even met him, and then when you meet him, it does feel like a bit of a surreal thing. But his name is all over the station. Everyone knows him around here. I think I had more questions about Ned when I first took the job than anything else. But, I'm lucky to call him a friend now. And it's so much fun doing those things on Monday with him, because he is also an encyclopedia of just knowledge for everything around this area and the history here. And who he is as a guy is just so funny. Ned it's unique to be at KY3 because I've met all three of the last sports directors. Chad still works there, got to work a little with Mark, and then Ned there for a long time. There's always someone to reach out to if I have a question about something, but Ned is just, better than anyone, but there's no one else like him.
Absolutely. And I think he had some recent surgery, so we wish him well in his recovery. All those years of losing at tennis, I think finally caught up with his hips and knees and everything else. But, I had a lot of fun with him for about 15 to 18 years on the radio doing it. As I used to say, I spent more time with him in the mornings than any wife of his ever did. So I was fortunate that way. You just get back from, kind of before we get into the Chiefs talk, what have you learned about the Ozarks and what the fans really like and appreciate seasonally in this area?
No doubt. Being almost through the second season now, from fall into winter, the passion at the high school level, I think, is very impressive. Doesn't matter if you're a town of 100 or, going to the big greater Springfield area, everyone has a love for their team. And, they kind of warned me when I was coming here, the Ozone, the attention we get and what people like to see out of it. Obviously, there's a very high standard with it. But I think it's just been fun to be able to continue to tell local stories. The biggest thing I always tell people about KY3 is that I always know people are watching and I always know people care. Whether it be the high school scene, Missouri State, up to the professional sports of Kansas City and St. Louis, people are locked in. I think, one of my first weeks here, it was like some little mistake I made on air talking about the Cardinals. Like they'd taken 3 or 4 in a series, and I said they split the series. Before I got back to my desk, which is about a 100-foot walk in the studio, I had about 4 emails. And at that time, I knew the passion that people had, not only for the Cardinals, but for everything going on. So I really appreciate people always holding me accountable, as I did learn too. But I think it is just, whether it's football season for a certain high school or basketball season for the high school, the history that they have, people lean into that and people care about that. And that's something that I never take for granted, because when you have the opportunity to present that to the public and you have the opportunity to find cool stories and show the highlights and show the big moments, you're the voice for a lot of history and a lot of great memories for local athletes in the area. And for me, I grew up in a huge city in Los Angeles. Like I never saw a TV camera at my game, never saw paper at my game. So the idea of just being able to have not only memories on video, but see yourself on TV is something I've always thought is really, really special. And I love to be able to do that and present those moments and present game winners or whatever it may be, championships to people all around here.
What's the biggest difference from an LA boy to living in Springfield, Missouri that is a good thing for you?
Yeah. Well, first off, traffic. I mean, that's the easiest one. The adjustment for the Midwest, my parents are originally from Minnesota, so I spent a lot of time in small towns in Minnesota growing up, so I kind of had the feel for it. Wichita and Springfield remind me a lot about each other, but I think Springfield, the unique thing is obviously just the area here is so cool, just the nature itself and all the things that you can do outside when it's warm enough to do so. But then the high school scene, I think it's unique because you have an immense amount of talent in this area, and obviously it's very hard for recruiting right now with the transfer portal and all things going on at the college level, but there's just an immense amount of talent here. Obviously right now, a great time for that. You got the number 1 player in the nation on the football side of things right here in our backyard. But you just see on a day-to-day basis, every time you go to cover a game, things that you wouldn't expect, and the high level of the athletes play here, and just how much they care too. I think that's what it comes down to. LA, there's so much going on. And obviously you have all the pro sports there. There's not as much kind of community passion for high school sports specifically, and there's just so much here that I think that's the fun part about it. As I go, kind of goes back to that same point. Like, people care, and if you can put it together and you do a good job, people see that and they see the work you put in. And I just love being able to put that work in and kind of continue to grow this brand of the Ozone that we have.
Well, as I mentioned, you just got back from New Orleans and the Super Bowl Sunday down there. The Chiefs 40-22 losers to the Eagles in a game that wasn't nearly that close as the final score indicated. Was this your third Chiefs Super Bowl you've covered?
Yeah, my third one. It's my sixth year covering the Chiefs, the third one I got to go to. And yeah, you said it. Even an 18-point loss doesn't kind of begin to describe how that game went. And I wasn't at that Super Bowl in Tampa Bay. I watched that one from back home, and it felt pretty similar like that. It just, there was no traction for the Chiefs at all the entire time. There was no spark. So often we've seen them maybe get down 10 points. I think there was a stat in the playoffs where Patrick Mahomes had gotten down 10 points every other time he'd come back to win the game in his career. And so you sort of expected that in the first quarter. They make the interception happen. They kind of start turning the tide, but then they give it right back. And it just was an uncharacteristic game for not only Mahomes, but for the Chiefs in general. And, that's how football goes sometimes. That's how sports goes in general. You're always going to have a day where you just don't have your stuff. Just unfortunate that it's at the biggest stage in football.
Absolutely. And, of course, my favorite time is the next day or two when all the analyzing goes on and you hear different opinions from the experts and the former players and what they saw. And wanted to get into some of those subjects with you. I was fortunate enough to cover 2 Super Bowls as a sports writer when the Rams went to Atlanta in 2000 and New Orleans in 2002, which was Brady's rookie year and the Vinatieri field goal. You and I were talking before the taping here that, it's not as glamorous as it sounds. It's actually a work trip. And I just wondered if New Orleans was hospitable. I know there had to be just a ton of security with the President of the United States there for the first time. And, the tragedy they had about a month ago, was it pretty tight all the way around?
It was. I believe the number was 2,000 additional police and military police officers that are in town for the game. So you felt that around the street. But what I will say for the 3 I've been to, I went to Phoenix, I went to Vegas, and now to New Orleans. New Orleans was easily the most organized. The staff that was helping the media was the most polite and most helpful. You could walk 15 feet and find someone to help you with whatever you needed to find. The access there was great. The setup there was great. And the Superdome is such a unique venue. It's so big. It accommodates so many people, which obviously helped with the ticket prices for fans. But I love New Orleans. And, yeah, you sort of mentioned it. It is a work trip. It's not like we're hanging out on Bourbon Street all night. You're getting up early. You're going to press conferences. You're working throughout the day. You're doing live shots on TV throughout the evening. So it's a different trip than anything else you will ever do, and it is nonstop work. But once you get to that Sunday, that's usually the best day. Because, 1, it's the Super Bowl, and we are so lucky to be able to go into that game. Mm-hmm. But 2, it's just kind of a different day because you're just analyzing the game, and then you're talking about it after. All the days leading up to it, you're finding stories, you're finding local ties, whatever it may be. But I would say the biggest difference of this Super Bowl is in Arizona, in Vegas. Those are great cities. But New Orleans just has the soul, and it has a flair to it that no other city in the country has. And I think that was reflected really well in the Super Bowl from the performance leading up to the game and just the overall vibe there. It's if you've never been to New Orleans, I'd highly suggest it. It's one of my favorite cities in the world. If to be honest, if the Super Bowl, if they had to pick one location every year, I think it should be in New Orleans because the city does a great job with it. The venue is great for it, and they know how to handle a game like that.
You talk about the vibe. Was there really a strong Eagles vibe inside the building? I mean, were there fewer Chiefs fans than Philadelphia fans there?
No doubt about it. And I don't think this number is right, but it felt like it was like 80% Eagles fans.
Wow.
So loud the entire game. You just saw so much green going into the stadium. Is part of that because the Chiefs, this is the third one, and, realistically for your average person, you can't just go to every Super Bowl. You can't be dropping thousands of dollars every single time they get to February. So was there kind of a sort of Chiefs fans not being able to get there? Maybe. I don't know. These tickets were a little more affordable. But I think that Eagle fan base is just ravenous. And they were so loud. And I think once the Chiefs kind of started losing that traction earlier in the game, the fans, especially from Philadelphia, were just so hungry to get that revenge after losing at Kansas City 2 years ago. It felt like it was an Eagles home game. It was so loud for them. And, it's such a rowdy fan base, too. I think that adds to it as well. Even if it was, let's say, a 60-40 split, it felt like so much more just because of how intense they were throughout the entire game. I mean, it was a third quarter. Chiefs are down 24 points, and there's fans behind me just screaming about calls, screaming about things going on. It's like, this game is pretty much in hand right now. But that sort of is, I think it's kind of a combative fan base and maybe gets a bad rap sometimes. But those fans certainly care, just like Chiefs Kingdom does as well.
Watching Travis Kelce during the game, on the sidelines, after the game, the body language just screamed a guy that's done. Did you get that feeling too when in the interview rooms, et cetera?
In the interviews, he was really quick. I don't think he gave more than a 10-word answer, and it wasn't like he was being standoffish, but I hadn't seen an interview like that since maybe my first year covering them. He's matured a lot throughout the years, which is a great thing, become a leader, become all that. I feel like I don't think he wants to go out on such a low point like that. What else does he have to prove? One of the greatest tight ends of all time, first ballot Hall of Famer, so much going on for life, beyond football for him too. But you'd think he would want to try to run it back one more time. But yeah, it's not. It kind of reminds me of Rob Gronkowski at the end of his career. It's just he's banged up, man, and it's hard to play that position for that length of time. He was such a great blocker earlier in his career too, and now it's going to find creative ways to get him open. He doesn't have that speed. He doesn't have the step that he used to have. Not that he was a speedster, but he just found ways to get open, and he didn't do that as much this year. So I think he comes back, but I think the Chiefs definitely need, if it's not going to be Noah Gray, to bring in another tight end. You look at across the league, Ravens are a great example, where you have Isaiah Likely and you have Mark Andrews. You need two big bodies like that to help each other, and especially with the Chiefs, the way they play the game, the way they kind of pick apart defenses now. It's not just those deep balls to Tyreek Hill like it was 5 years ago. I think, need someone else to pair with him, not only because it's just another talented set of hands on the field, but it's going to help Kelce get open and still do what he's able to do.
Yeah, and I'm a huge Dan Patrick fan and every morning listener. Just think the guy's brilliant, and he's had guests the last 2 days and made some good points about Kelce's off-field life now. Obviously the Taylor Swift angle, the $100 million Amazon podcast with his brother, so many things now. And one of the former players, I can't remember who it was, said you just can't do all those things at that age and maintain, the body and the fitness and everything you need to do. And they thought that might be part of why he might be done. But, he early in the year, he looked like he was a step slower, but then you had the late surge, where he had the big games and looked like he was back. So that's clearly going to be a story to follow, and a lot of dominoes could topple if he's gone, right, with where they go.
Absolutely. And I think that's a great point, too. And that's kind of what I alluded to, is just he has so much going on in life. It's like every other television ad is Travis Kelce, the podcast, everything that comes with being in a relationship of two celebrities like that. Like, that takes a lot out of, as you mentioned, the training that's necessary to be at your best. So at a certain point, it's like, yeah, is this worth it anymore? He certainly doesn't need the money. It's not about that. It's more about the pride of it. But I think that's also, especially in the NFL, what a lot of guys struggle with is when is the right time to hang it up. I will say that if they had won this game, I don't think he would be back. And because what else? You make the three-peat, you make history, you accomplish everything you really could have ever set out to do in your career. But it's hard to imagine him walking away with this bad taste in his mouth. And so I feel like when you have maybe one more year of Andy Reid, they said he'd be back. That's not going to be forever. You're going into the prime of Patrick Mahomes right now. You're still in the midst of that. I feel like he's got one more in him, but because of everything else we mentioned, it wouldn't be shocking to see him step away either.
And we've got a pissed off Patrick Mahomes, so we'll get to see what that looks like again. When he's. And
I think that's what Travis was like after the game too. He was pissed.
Yeah,
he wasn't happy about it. It wasn't standoffish to the media, but you could tell it was frustrating for that entire group because it's.
Well, they were embarrassed a little bit too, I think, weren't they?
Totally.
Yeah.
And it's I don't know if it's better to lose a game like that or to be have your heart ripped out in the final moments. Losing stinks either way, but that game was just over so quick, and it's so not what you want your last time on the football field to be, I feel like. So, yeah, big decisions come from Kansas City. Not that they have to reinvent the wheel or anything for that franchise right now. They still got all that core in place, but the tweaks they need to make, I think he can help with that too. The amount of money that he has on his contract, does he kind of take a reduction there to help them strengthen the line, maybe really get a true number one wide receiver that they haven't had since Tyreek Hill? He's capable of doing that. And I think obviously, when you have $100 million podcast, it's not like you need an NFL contract. He could play for $50 and be fine. It's just will the team do that? Will he do that? Will that all come together?
Well, and when your girlfriend's worth $100 billion too, that you better go ahead and propose, get that locked down financially, and then then you could share your salary for football. But you look at the receiving core, and there are a lot of free agents for the Chiefs this offseason, and the nice thing about it is that a lot of them are the old guys that really weren't doing much down the stretch, the Juju Smith-Schusters and DeAndre Hopkins, who had just a brutal drop there. And I think we saw the coming of age of Xavier Worthy in the postseason and especially in the Super Bowl with his 8 catches and 157 yards and 2 TDs and that deep connection. And it kind of did you get the same feeling as like, why wasn't Pat throwing deep to Worthy more often and all along?
Yeah, it felt like that. And there was one play specifically I remember in the game from the vantage point I had where he had Worthy streaking up the field.
Yeah.
He had the protection that he didn't really have the rest of the game, and he just didn't let it go, and he tried to dump it off to, I think, Hollywood Brown, and it just didn't go well. And it's like, I don't know why that hesitation was there. Xavier Worthy, go back to Tyreek Hill again, is faster than him and is just as capable as a wide receiver, it seems. So I think we're going to see more of that next year. Yeah, you think about that. Think about getting Rashid Rice back because obviously he was gone for the whole year. Hollywood Brown was banged up almost the entire season. They already have a pretty good core right there, but you add one kind of big body receiver to that.
Mm-hmm.
Not to say they are going to get him because they can't, but like an A.J. Brown type on the other side with the Eagles. If you can kind of bring that all together, that offense is right back up there with the best in the NFL. And then on top of that, Isaiah Pacheco, that's hard to come back from the injury he came back from in the middle of the year. It was impressive how good they were without so many pieces and how little that they struggled throughout the year. Maybe you could say they got, some luck here and there with block kicks at the end of games or missed field goals, but they still found ways to win. So you got to feel good. And as you mentioned, a pissed off Patrick Mahomes going into the offseason, that's something that no team in the league wants to deal with.
Well, and you wonder, I don't think they have the cap room to go after a T. Higgins, because it sounds like Joe Burrow's politicking for the Bengals to re-sign him and keep him, even though they have Jamar Chase and need to pay him. But, boy, T. Higgins would be that guy, too, with a Higgins, Rice, and Worthy combo and 3 wides. And, whether it's Kelsey or Noah Gray. And there's some really good tight ends in this draft class, too. So It'll be fun to see. The Rice thing will be interesting to see what the suspension situation becomes because he was able to avoid it this year, and then the injury knocked him out. I think when Mahomes took him out himself, didn't he, with the interception or block, and stuff. So, and then
that's a good point there too. The suspension I hadn't thought about, but still a healthy offseason for him. And even if that adds to it, I don't know what his timeline is right now, but that could end up being kind of when he would be back anyway.
I don't know what they do with Kareem Hunt because he was very valuable with Pacheco trying to get back to full speed, and I don't know that Pacheco ever really did. But Kareem Hunt's going to be 29, almost 30 years old, and a free agent. They paid Pacheco, didn't they? Or am I misremembering that? Did they give him a new deal, or did they?
Yeah, I believe he's not yet on that new deal. And that's the thing with Kansas City. You look at, and really running backs in the NFL right now, it's such a tough time to be at that position. Those guys are not getting paid, and I don't know that the Chiefs want to be a team that continue to pay running backs. They seem to be pretty happy finding solutions, whether it be late round draft picks or bringing in veterans like Kareem Hunt, Samaje Perine. In years earlier, you had Jerick McKinnon. They just find guys that know how to play the game, and they can get a discounted rate. But Pacheco, when he's right, man, that's a special running back right there. And you look at the other side, what the Eagles did with Saquon, obviously they paid out, and it paid off because he carried them to the Super Bowl. Maybe didn't have the game that you would expect in the Super Bowl, but the Chiefs having to be in the box the entire time to slow him down clearly opened it up for Devontae Smith and clearly opened it up for A.J. Brown. So just having that factor there with the line that they have, the Eagles are going to be good for a very long time. Not that the Chiefs need to copy that prototype, but that's something that they need to address this offseason for sure with the line and then what the future of that running back room looks like.
Yeah, Trent Smith, the guard's a free agent. That's a key guy you got to try to bring back, because and what did you see? I mean, this offensive line that I know they had their struggles during the year, but my gosh, 6 sacks without a blitz. And, the one thing I noticed that I thought was different from other games was it looked like the Eagles, with that 4-man front, did a really good job on each end of actually creating a pocket that Mahomes couldn't escape. So Mahomes' only route was to step up and try to go up the middle. Well, the Eagles had 2 big guys there and all the traffic from Pat's own offensive lineman. He never could get anywhere. I mean, what did you see in that offensive line performance and what the Eagles were able to do?
Yeah, I mean, first off, Eagles defensive line, I mean, that's 4 Pro Bowlers essentially at any time. I mean, that is just a massive unit and an incredibly talented unit to begin with. So the Chiefs had their work cut out for them. And, it starts at left tackle, always going to be the biggest piece of the line. When you have to move Joe Thuney over and fill in that spot, that's going to weaken the middle. It was just one of those things where all the ideas that they had at that left tackle never really worked out. And I think you kind of finally saw it in the Super Bowl where they just didn't have enough to do that. So, Trey Smith is a big part of that, bringing it back, but they haven't exactly hit on their draft picks for the line the last couple of years, besides Creed Humphrey, who's one of the best centers in the league. So I think it is one of those things where you need to have guys playing at the traditional position group. I think it works on a week-to-week basis, maybe to switch guys around and move them around, but they need to bolster that group. And whether it's through free agency, whether it's through the draft, it needed to happen. And on Sunday, it was just one of those things where I think that's a great point to it too, where Mahomes all through that postseason and every single postseason would just find ways to get a first down when they needed it. 3rd and 9, everything's covered. They're not exactly going to have a linebacker that's going to be in a QB spy situation right there, and he takes advantage of it. But there was no real time to take advantage of it because the defensive ends were just coming so fast downhill, and the 2 defensive tackles that the Eagles play up in the middle there are so big, especially Jordan Davis. There was just nowhere for him to go. You kept seeing him kind of get pinned there, and on that interception in their own red zone, that's exactly what happened. He had a bull rush from the end, hit Mahomes kind of in the hip as he's throwing, and that affects the throw. And then that almost seals the game at that point when the Eagles can just walk in a touchdown after that. So the thing that is good for the Chiefs is that the things that they need to improve are very clear. And it's not many of them, but it's not like it's a mystery going into the offseason what they need to bolster and what they need to be better at to get to that championship level.
Yeah, Pat got to experience I'm sorry, go ahead.
No, yeah, that's the thing. You got a quarterback in your prime, and it's something that you need to invest fully in as much as you can while you got it.
Mahomes got to experience L.A. traffic there, didn't he, when trying to get out of his own pocket there?
Yeah, that's what it feels like sitting on the 405 at this moment. You could get hit in any direction, and you're not going to be able to go very fast forward.
And I think I said Trent Smith, so I was paying homage to the lifelong backup tight end, I believe, wasn't he?
Yeah, Trey Smith.
Instead of Trey Smith, yeah. So,
I mean, you could have had Trent Smith in there. It probably would have made much of a difference on Sunday.
Some defensive guys, I know that they got to address the Nick Bolton situation. He's a free agent, Justin Reed. But those guys, I thought, played well enough for the most part. If the offense had been helpful and if they didn't have the pick 6 to get down 17-0, defense wasn't embarrassing in any way. They just had such a tremendous hole there. But one thing I thought that was interesting, I think it was Mike Florio with Pro Football Talk had said yesterday that if you created a 22-man starting lineup of the Eagles and Chiefs combined, he said 17 of them would probably be Eagles, which is pretty alarming.
Yeah.
And
I think so.
And you ask that question and leads into, was Buffalo maybe better equipped to give the Eagles a better Super Bowl than the Chiefs were?
I think potentially. You go back to look at that 22 full team roster from the Super Bowl.
Uh-huh.
I assume you would have Mahomes in that roster, but Jalen Hurts has played better in the Super Bowl the last 2 times that they've met there. And, everything else that goes along with that is sort of all slanted towards the Eagles. I think Buffalo, yeah, you could argue they'd be better equipped, and I think maybe it would have been a closer game. That game on Sunday was just kind of a one-off thing. But Buffalo's thing is all mental. It's not about being a worse football team. They're just as talented. You saw when they played in Buffalo during the regular season. It's the mental hurdle of winning at Arrowhead and beating the Chiefs in the playoffs. So I think, yeah, if they had gotten through there, that game would have been incredible because Josh Allen can do a couple things that Patrick Mahomes can't. Obviously, Mahomes has that same thing going for him. He has his magic. But the Bills were a great team. And it just sort of became the situation where even if I believe it's Dalton Kincaid catches that ball at the end of the game, they're in field goal range and you can play on. But Josh Allen, especially in the postseason, has been phenomenal the last couple of years. And it's just like they can't get that help and they can't get over the edge. They can't help themselves almost. So, yeah, I don't know. I think the Eagles, you got to give it a tip of the cap to their GM, Howie Roseman. He's just done a phenomenal job drafting. And, it may be kind of simple, but they just seem to draft like 4 guys from Georgia every year, and they're all great. It's a reason that Georgia's always so good, or Alabama. All the players that they do take seem to be extremely high-end. Maybe it's sometimes it's not always overcomplicating thing. It's just taking the best player available at that time.
I'm a fantasy football addict. I have been for years. I admit it. I need treatment. I need help. I had a team or two with Pat Mahomes on it. He's not a good fantasy quarterback anymore, or at least as good as you would think, given where he's drafted. He plays the Super Bowl. He doesn't have great numbers all year. He plays the Super Bowl, throws 2 picks, a pick 6. He fumbles. He's hesitant to throw deep the one time. Another time he could have hit Worthy. Is it crazy to think any less of him after this year? Because, this guy going into the year and even going into the postseason, we were in the discussion of, is he the greatest quarterback of all time?
Yeah, I don't think that's a crazy question. And it is a weird kind of change. You think back to the first time we really saw him on the field. I think it was a preseason game against the Falcons in Atlanta. And he just threw this absolute rainbow, 60 yards. And you're like, man, this guy has ability that few people on earth possess. And now he just seems to kind of shy away from that. He had 1 year where he had more interceptions than he'd ever had before. And I think that kind of turned him off from taking those risks down there. So I think it is a fair question right now. Is he slipping a little bit from what we saw early in his career, or has the Mahomes playbook been figured out? I think that's a legitimate question. But what I will say on the flip side of that is that if there's one guy I think you'd want to bet on in the league, is that if you doubt him, he's going to find a way to get better and find a way to overcome it, it's Patrick Mahomes. And I think the mental game for him is so strong. After the game, a great example. He finished that game. That's, one of the worst games of his entire career on the biggest stage on the planet. And he looked every reporter in the eye for 14 minutes and took every single post-game question, put the blame on himself, and said, I got to be better and I will be better. And I think a lot of guys, that may be lip service. For him, I think that's something that training probably started yesterday on getting back to the Super Bowl when it comes to 2026 and the 2025 season.
Well, so what the heck do we do now? There's no football. And I don't know what I do till the combine, I guess, helps a little bit. Then the draft. Then you get mini camps and everything. And I guess for you and me and everybody else, it's high school basketball. Lady Bears are on a roll. The Bears are trying to get a little momentum going into the off season here at the end. High school basketball, what are some of the stories you're excited to follow the rest of the way?
Definitely that. I think Lady Bears is a big one. I think they have a legitimate chance to be a tournament team. It's going to take winning the Valley tournament to do that, but there's no reason they can't do that. So I think that is one of the more interesting storylines we'll be following. High school basketball, coming down the stretch here for the regular season. Conference titles going to be crowned the next couple of weeks, and you get into the district championships and things like that. That's always a fun time of year. And then, as that weather starts to warm up, we are only about 45 days away from baseball. So that goes Royals, who obviously are going to have a huge year ahead of them based on what they did last year. Interesting year for the Cardinals as they kind of revamp. Not a rebuild, as they say, but, you got to get some better pieces in place. And then the Springfield Cardinals, too. I love minor league baseball. So there are all those things, too, on top of our high school coverage to look forward to. But, yeah, there's nothing like football season, and that is something that's always surely missed. But this time of year, it really feels like it is a year-round sport because of the things you mentioned. Now you go into scouting. The NFL draft is only 2 months away. And then before you know, we're back at training camp. It is shocking how kind of quick all this offseason goes for the NFL. And I think it's an exciting time of year, too, because the Chiefs, it's not like the future is bleak. You're a couple pieces away from being right back to where you are. So there's plenty to talk about when it comes to everything going around the Ozarks and up in both the major cities that we cover here in Missouri.
I'm excited to see if Jackson Cantwell throws a shot put 1,000 feet, and
he might.
And then also the first time, since I've been following sports here, that Keith Gutton's not on the sidelines at Missouri State baseball. Joey Hawkins calling the shots. They got an offense that ought to be able to put up double digits a game in runs. They're going to be a lot of fun to watch, too. And Sully will be there for it all. And I will leave you with what Ned would say. Sully, you've been a gentleman for joining us today, and I want to thank you for your time.
That's good. It's almost as if you've done radio with him.
Exactly, yeah. Sully, appreciate it, and look forward to talking to you more, get you back on here more often. Thanks for your insight, and now go get some sleep after the Super Bowl week.
I can do that. Thanks so much for having me, Scott. It's always a pleasure. Yeah, we'll do it again real soon.
You bet. Thanks. Wrap-up segment in 3, 2, 1. That's going to do it for this week's edition of Around the Ozarks Sports Scene. Big thanks to Sully Engels for taking time to let us know more about him, and what a nice guy. Give him your support when you see him out covering and shooting the high school games and the Bears games, Lady Bears games. The guy's another good one in the long line of really good sports directors over there at KY3. Big thanks to our sponsors, the Pitts Pizza and Pub and Fast Break Sports. Appreciate your support throughout the year on the podcast. And, of course, we remind you each week what to watch this weekend, brought to you by The Pitch over in the Southern Hills Shopping Center. No more football after the Super Bowl now, so we're going to have to adjust and cope for a little bit. But there is lots of basketball. As we're taping this, the Bears are actually home with Evansville Wednesday of this week. We tape this on Tuesdays usually, but Bears are home. Then they are at Illinois, Chicago, and at Valparaiso this weekend. Back home on February 22nd when Illinois State comes in. Lady Bears, as we discussed, having a great season, 18-5 overall, 10-2 in the Valley. They're at Southern Illinois this Thursday night, and they're back home with Valparaiso coming in for Sunday in a 2 p.m. tip-off at Great Southern Bank Arena. Get over and watch the Lady Bears. Drury teams are home this weekend as well. The Kansas City area teams, Rockhurst is here on Thursday, William Jewell here on Saturday. Saturday is the annual homecoming game for the Panthers and Lady Panthers. So get out and catch some college basketball, some really good high school basketball, all right here in the Ozarks. We'll see you next week on Around the Ozarks Sports Scene.